Would Aisha Sherazi please join us at the delegations mic? Delegations mic is the podium.
As you can see, I've never done this before. I'm not sure how hard and fast you are about the 4-minute rule, but I will try to be, I will try to speak like my teenage daughter and speak on double speak. Okay. Good evening to our chair, vice chair, trustees, director, OCDSB staff, and others who are here this evening, including fellow parents. I would like to begin by taking this opportunity to thank OCDSB staff, administrators, teachers, assistants, board staff, and folks at every level for the immense efforts that are made to help create learning opportunities for the students in our city. I would like to give a special shout out to the Equity Department, who do such incredible work in schools and help in creating equitable learning and working in schools. As some of you may know, I have been a spiritual care worker at Marvell High School since 2006. I'm a member of our Muslim Leaders Working Group, and I conduct workshops with Rabbi Bloom on reducing the harm from stereotypes and bias with students across the board. In the Office of the Human Rights and Equity Advisor's first annual report, a recommendation was made for an Arabic-speaking equity coach that would be able to provide support for issues related to Islamophobia and anti-Arab discrimination. Using my experiences working with students within OCDSB as well as the broader community, I would like to advocate for that recommendation. In a diverse city like ours, it can be hard to create the equitable environment that we are all looking for if we do not harness the right expertise. That is not to say efforts are not made, they absolutely are. MLOs also perform very important work to try and bridge the gap at times. Nonetheless, I would like to echo the concerns shared about gaps in our current system with respect to Arabic-speaking students and Muslim parents specifically. The Arabic-speaking community is very diverse, consisting of Muslims, Christians, and Druzes, as well as some Jews. They have unique customs and rich cultures. Some Arabic-speaking people have been living in Ottawa for decades, others are newcomers. We know there has been a rise in anti-Arab hatred, as well as anti-Palestinian racism, Islamophobia, along with anti-Semitism. All forms of hatred are abhorrent and huge efforts are being made to address them. Nonetheless, I do see gaps. I worry deeply about students that have come from other war-torn countries such as Iraq and Syria, and the impact of what we see unfolding must be having on them and their families. I recall a student who was referred to me because he was getting into conflicts with other students at times. When I sat down with him and another student, they spoke about the hardships they were going through. One said he had witnessed his teacher being killed in a classroom. He said his mother was upset because one sibling had died in their home country, and she knew fleeing the area would mean leaving that child behind. Being unable to visit their grave was a huge source of anxiety for her, and yet one of his siblings needed medical treatment which would not be available in a conflict zone. They set out for Canada, and when they arrived, that sibling died. He spoke about how his mother was depressed and it weighed heavily on him. Our working group has collected data reflecting incidents of Islamophobia in schools long before October 7th. Sometimes children may act out or fall behind, and we may not understand the root of why that is happening and how we can support that student to help bring out their potential. This is the difficult task ahead of us, to help students have the support they need to be able to succeed when everything else seems to be going against them. I would like to say that try as we might to be fair and equitable, the data shows clearly that students of color from low-income neighborhoods are amongst those who are more likely to be suspended. If we do not understand the lived experiences of our students, we can't possibly support them fully towards success. I encourage the board to follow through with the recommendation of the Human Rights and Equity Advisor in the hiring of a Muslim Arabic-speaking equity coach. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation. Are there, no, don't leave the podium. Are there questions from trustees of clarification for the delegation? Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. I'd like to thank Dr. Sherazi for being with us tonight. I know the timing of this meeting is not great for you and members of your community. My question is, I know that you're very familiar with our equity team, and I thank you for your contribution in the OCDSB. Are you asking for additional resources, or are you asking for this position to be within the existing resources?
Short answer is existing resources. So it is my understanding that a couple of positions are coming up for their regular, each position is 3 years. And so those positions are coming up. And so that was my understanding.
Thank you.
All right. I have Trustee Scott.
Thank you. And thank you very much for your delegation, Dr. Sherazi. One thing I would appreciate some clarification on, in terms of talking about bridging the gaps, are you envisioning direct student support or more support to staff in schools or outreach to the community, or all of the above?
All of the above. Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. Trustee Bell.
Thank you very much for your delegation and your courageous words and sharing of experiences. Really appreciated. My question is very similar to Trustee Scott's, in that what type of support do educators need? I've heard from the community that it's been quite a challenge to have conversations about current events, those that are happening right now, seeing children being killed in Gaza. And so how can we better support educators? And does messaging from our leadership and our board make a difference for those educators? Thank you.
That's a great question. We recognize that, of course, our board is made up of a huge number of students, and all from different backgrounds. That being said, I think what we're seeing on the ground is, instances where sometimes administration may follow through, where an issue has come up. And sometimes it would be helpful to have that student support on hand to be able to help admin navigate without taking a necessarily punitive approach to things, maybe, understanding the background, understanding the culture, all of those things. Those nuances really, really help admin and teachers and staff do the best that they can in sometimes very difficult circumstances.
Thank you. And just the second part of the question is, would messaging from trustees on issues, and specifically from our senior leadership within the administration, help to facilitate a greater understanding on the ground as well?
Absolutely. I think the community are always looking for that empathetic approach. So, when trustees demonstrate that they understand the pain that the community is going through, those sentiments are very well received.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Sherazi. I'm now looking for Amy Awad. All right, you have 4 minutes and your timer will be on the screen.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Board Chair, trustees. Thank you for this opportunity to address you today on a subject that is important to me and that I know is important to you as well. I have 2 daughters and 2 siblings in OCDSB schools, and I've been part of the school council of my daughter's schools, as well as the Ottawa-Carleton Assembly of School Councils. I'll be speaking today to Agenda Item 6.1, Report on Staffing, and specifically to the role of equity coaches. Before that, though, I want to talk about 2 recent situations that I've come across personally. In the first one, a high school teacher insists that a student should not be in the hallway. When the student explains that she was allowed to walk around, he says that he's going to walk her back to class to confirm with her teacher. When she agrees, he changes his mind and insisted that they go to the office instead. When she complains that she might miss the rest of her class, he proceeds to send a letter to each one of her teachers explaining that he sees an issue with her being in the hallway. It's apparent to the student that among all this many students that were in the hallway, it was only her and her two other visibly Muslim friends that were treated in this way. The teacher had made it clear earlier how he felt about students that had stayed home earlier in the semester on a day that some Muslim parents had kept their children home. In the second scenario, a high school history teacher engages in discussions with students about the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. He says that any number of civilian casualties is justifiable given the objective pursued by Israel, and that in any event, there was no such thing as proportionality in war. He also called students with whom he was discussing the issue and held opposing views anti-Semitic. While the teacher's statements were inherently problematic, it's hard to imagine how the one Palestinian student with family in Gaza felt as she witnessed these discussions, although she wasn't part of them. Yet this was happening openly, and other teachers and administrators expressed that it was okay, it was all part of the debate. These situations are happening in many schools as we speak. They're not only corrosive to a safe learning environment, but they're also complex. They involve multiple intersectional interests, and sometimes they may involve perceived conflict of rights. Equity coaches can help bridge the gap between equity-seeking students, families, and school staff. They can help identify training needs and can bring perspective and fairness to difficult situations. To be as effective as possible, these coaches need real lived experience as well as relevant cultural and linguistic skills. It is for that reason that I'm here to suggest that what the OCDSB needs is two specialized equity coaches, an Arab-speaking coach and a Muslim-focused coach. And there's an opportunity right now to make this a reality without allocating additional resources. We want to seize that opportunity. The OCDSB has a sizable population of Arab and Muslim students. Most Muslims in Ottawa are not Arab, and many Arabs are not Muslims. These groups face different overlapping challenges, and they need help addressing them separately. As residents of Ottawa, we are all exposed to, and sometimes even desensitized to, various forms of anti-Arab racism, anti-Palestinian racism, and Islamophobia. This reality is documented in hate crimes and police traffic stop data, in study after study about discrimination in employment, and in public surveys like the Ipsos survey on anti-Arab racism in Canada. Canada has seen more murders motivated by Islamophobia in the past 5 to 7 years than any other G7 country. The school board is aware of these realities, and the first annual report of the Office of the Human Rights and Equity Advisor recognizes at page 24 that there is not adequate support to prevent and address anti-Arab racism and Islamophobia when it occurs. This report is only valuable if the board is willing to act on it.
You have reached the end of your 4 minutes, though there are questions. I have Trustee Dickson, if you have a question.
Thank you for coming forward to speak. The one question that I do have is, what benefit do you see the position having on Muslim and Arab students?
I think the value here is that when difficult situations do arise, right now students feel that they have to address them directly with their school administration. Sometimes families may not have the language skills or the abilities to explain how they feel that they haven't been treated fairly or to describe problems. The value of having kind of a dedicated equity coach that they could reach out to is that it provides kind of a mediator that brings lived experience, the ability to articulate things in the language that people speak in schools, which sometimes students don't have and frequently families don't have, even though I think that they have a perspective that needs to be brought forward. So hopefully the value here is to have that kind of mediator that brings that perspective, identifies where there's knowledge gaps and can recommend training and further development for staff so that at some point in the future, there's no longer a need for these roles.
And just to follow up on that thought, do you see this position, should it be a teacher position or for someone from the community?
I think the key is that the person has the right skill set for it. So I could see either a teacher or somebody for the community doing it, as long as they're able to bring that equity lens, some of that lived experience, and a good understanding of how our school system works, which can sometimes be even a little bit opaque to people outside of it. So I think it's a mix of the right skills. It doesn't need to be a teacher.
Thank you. That's it.
All right, Trustee Scott.
Thank you very much for your presentation. The stories you tell are very concerning. And what I'm wondering was whether there was any resolution to either of those situations that you are aware of.
So in the first situation, I think that the student just didn't have the confidence, or the family didn't have the confidence to kind of try to address it head on. So it just left to hang and things continued. The second situation is ongoing right now. And I think that there's been a reach out to the equity office to try to mediate it a little bit, but it's ongoing. So I don't know what the resolution is yet.
Thank you very much for letting us know that. I know that it's hard sometimes to come forward. And I also am very aware that sometimes when people do come forward, it takes a while to get it all sorted out. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Trustee Bell.
Thank you very much again for your delegation. You mentioned the specific needs of Arab students and the specific needs of Muslim students and how those can be distinct. I'd be curious to know what the percentage of students we have in the OCDSB is, and maybe the staff can address that after. But given that we are a board with a very large population of these students, this is, in your opinion, would this be a great opportunity for the OCDSB to demonstrate leadership on this? And are there other boards that you know of that are also stepping up to support in this way? Thank you.
You're welcome, and two very good questions. I'm sure the staff can provide you the more kind of precise numbers, but I believe we're talking about it for both those groups, something like 14% and 20% of the students in the board. I'm not sure which one corresponds to which, but there's substantial numbers of students that could potentially need kind of this help and guidance. And absolutely, I do think there's an opportunity here for the OCDSB to show leadership. And I think designating these positions to focus on the issues that are actually happening on the ground is the way to do that. Unfortunately, I don't have the background in terms of what's happening at other boards to be able to answer the last part of your question.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Awad. I'm now going to be looking for Menasheh, Speevak. Because your submission was late, you're only going to have 2 minutes.
Sure. I can also answer about the stats. It's in your meeting notes from the March 5th.
You have 2 minutes. You may say whatever you wish.
All right. Thank you for having me. My name is Menasheh, and I'm a white, Jewish, trans, and queer settler on stolen Algonquin and Anishinaabe land and a former EA in this board. Right now, the Palestinian, as well as wider Muslim and Arab communities, are experiencing devastation, grief, and loss. OCDSB staff cannot control what a community experiences, but it can control how it responds with support. There's no substitution for the critical equity lens or for the support of students from someone with shared living experience. Systems issue 13 on page 24 of the first annual public report of the Human Rights and Equity Advisor states that Indigenous, Black, Jewish, and 2S LGBTQ+ identity-specific supports are available for students. Data suggests that approximately 14.7% of the students' population identify as Middle Eastern and 19.3% identify as Muslim. This is a gap, and it means that there is not adequate support to prevent and address anti-Arab racism and Islamophobia when it occurs. The solution, Arab student support role, establish a central level identity-based position focused on community engagement, support for Arab and Arab-speaking students and families, and advocacy and support to schools and the district on issues related to Islamophobia and anti-Arab discrimination. The report on student suspension for years 2022 to 2023 states that students identifying as Middle Eastern have one of the highest suspension rates amongst racial identities, with a disproportionality rate of 1.9. From 2019 to 2020, the suspension rate increased by 1% and by 2% from 2021 to 2022. The Valuing Voices survey shows students who identify as Indigenous, Black, Middle Eastern, gender diverse, composite, and or having a disability are suspended at a much higher rate than all students. Data showing the presence and rise in anti-Arab racism and Islamophobia can be found There you go.
Thank you. I now look to my colleagues around the table. Are there any questions for the delegation? I see Trustee Aziz.
Thank you for coming to our board and delegating on behalf and with your community today. My question is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you were or are an EA with the OCDSB or with the school board?
I was, yes.
Based on that experience, do you think an equity support coach for Arabic and or Muslim students would be adequate support for our students and community?
I do, based on two different experiences. One happened several times. Teachers, parents, and students have all come to me at different times saying that after I've connected them with student support, student success coaches that share their same marginalized identity, that they've noticed an increase in academic success, an increase in feeling belonging, like they belong and that they are safe in school. And also teachers and parents have noted, based on curriculum, or the markers in the OCDSB curriculum, that they're excelling in social emotional learning, which is, I mean, in your curriculum. So that's a good thing. The second is that when I was an EA working in middle school, 2 grades, I'm not sure how many staff, but I was the only one with the capacity to take on a student group for, it was mixed Black excellence as well as BIPOC community. I'm white, I don't belong to that community. And when I had asked the entire staff team, the teachers that do identify as BIPOC didn't have the capacity. And that just goes to show that we can't ask members of the Arab, Palestinian, Muslim community to volunteer their time and resources to teach the rest of the board how to care for our students when we know that the board has budgeted finance and time to hire someone to pay for their skills to teach the board, its teachers, vet resources, that when we have memos that are changed that says we can no longer say this, we can no longer use this book, we can no longer have exams during Ramadan because it's unfair and or unequitable to the Muslim population. When there are those kinds of changes, it's not just about a memo that states those changes. The teachers then have to go and find their own resources and make sure that it's approved by the board. It's an extensive amount of time to put on a teacher that already uses most of their free time for that. So hiring someone and paying them for their skills, expertise, and lived experiences to vet resources and help teachers implement culturally responsive pedagogy as well as board-approved resources is the only ethical thing that makes sense.
Thank you, and I'm sorry so many members of the community are having to come during Ramadan to delegate on this issue, but immensely grateful for their time.
All right, I have Trustee Bell. I saw a hand, but it's disappeared. Okay, Trustee Dickson.
Thanks for coming to speak. I have just one question. We know that representations matter. How do you feel will be the impact for all students to have an Arab-speaking Muslim teacher or coach in the school?
There are different areas of impact. One that I can see is in the roadmap to, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your name of it, the roadmap to equity. There are identifiable actionable items such as identifying barriers. And like I said, there are no substitutes to an equitable lens, a critical equitable lens from somebody in that community. We can learn and react after being told what is appropriate or not appropriate, but we can't anticipate it. And so having someone that is paid to put on that hat and think with a critical lens, look through documents, look through the calendar, look through timing of this and that, how grades are given, what's in this text. If there's a red flag, that can only be identified by somebody of that community. And if we're not going to listen to people of that community that we have stated is marginalized, then we're not actually doing the work. The second thing that I can think of is representation matters. If we want students to believe that they can grow up and achieve certain professions, certain accomplishments, then we need to show them that, you know, we value that in our society. By not hiring people to fill those roles, we're showing people that that doesn't matter enough. We could say, yeah, sure, we'd love to have more money to be able to hire, you know, everybody. But when you don't make it a priority, then you're saying that they're not enough. Their representation isn't enough. The third stream I can think of is that, just like the former person was speaking, if I don't know that I'm going to be met with acceptance, then I might not feel comfortable coming to my teacher, my principal, my EA, the janitor to explain what my problem is. And sometimes a visual representation that that person is on your side is what counts, because we can't expect students. I mean, we know that people's brains don't develop fully until they are 25. So we can't expect a student to have the competency to work through the emotional impacts of being oppressed and get over that and build trust with staff. We need to give that to them.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further questions, thank you for your delegation. I'm looking for Asmaa Younis.
Good evening, everyone.
You have 2 minutes whenever you're ready.
Okay. My name is Asmaa. I am the community representative at one of the Saturday Arabic schools and also a supply teacher. Due to my close and constant involvement with my Arab Palestinian community, I have been made aware of the growing number of Arabic-speaking and Palestinian students who have been facing different sorts of racism, which has been on the rise since October 7th. These students do need support. Hiring a Palestinian Arabic-speaking equity coach is paramount for a number of reasons. Firstly, it addresses the pressing need for culturally experienced support within an educational setting. By having a coach who understands the Arab-Palestinian culture and community, the OCDSB can better cater to the needs of students and families facing discrimination or marginalization. Also, having a Palestinian Arabic-speaking equity coach or coaches serves as another step taken by the board towards fostering inclusivity and promoting social justice within the school system. The coach can offer support for students and families who may otherwise feel silenced or due to anti-Arab or anti-Palestinian racism. Moreover, this initiative is in line with the OCDSB's strategic emphasis on students' well-being. Also, a Palestinian or Arabic-speaking equity coach can play a vital role in advancing cultural competencies and sensitivity among educators and administrators by facilitating workshops and training sessions and leading educational initiatives. The coach can provide also guidance to even non-Palestinian students who might approach with different questions and not finding the knowledgeable person to answer them.
All right.
Sorry, I had to speak so fast.
You did very well. Do we have any questions? I am seeing no questions from trustees. So thank you very much for your delegation. I would also like to note that there are 2 written delegations in the agenda package. I'd like to thank Dina and Rania for taking the time to submit the written delegations. The director did want to comment.
Through you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to our delegates and wishing all of our delegates who are recognizing this time a blessed Ramadan. From a staff perspective, I do want to say to all the delegates that we agree entirely. A couple of things for your consideration. Staff has had the notion of some additional support to serve our Arab-speaking and our Muslim populations for some time now. So we really appreciate the nature of the the delegations. I'm going to turn it over momentarily to Superintendent Farrish to speak a little bit more about the supports in place, but I do want to make a couple of comments for our delegates this evening. The first one of which is that our supports centrally are on a cycle. We have each and every year, excuse me, new members of talented staff who join the central team to complement the experienced members on the team who over time then cycle back into schools. So part of our cycle for central support is a combination of new and experienced peoples as educators that serve the system. And that's always a wonderful opportunity because it rejuvenates the thinking. We get fresh ideas that come from school, and we send people back into the school system after they've served. So there are opportunities each and every year to adjust the nature of our central supports and complement. And I did want to share that because it was mentioned a few times about the opportunity in the presentations. And I wanted to reaffirm for our delegates that that is indeed the case. And again, I'll turn over to Superintendent Farrish in a moment. I do want to say, having said that, and I appreciate all the comments on the specific supports that our delegates spoke to this evening, that beyond any one given individual, it is our collective responsibility to meet the needs of all of our students, including our Arab-speaking and Muslim students and other students. And so we would never, from a staff perspective, rely on one individual alone. Just like when we look at environmental sustainability, recycling, we don't count on one individual to do that for our system, but that one individual can be leveraged to support the learning of the rest of the system around environmental sustainability, as an example. And I think the spirit of what we heard tonight speaks to that as well. And I love the comments made on the responses around culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy. Very, very important for us. So the staff is very much behind the thinking of this and has been in our thoughts for some time. And I do want to turn over to Superintendent Farrish just for a little bit about the nature of the roles, because they're not all coaching roles. There are some different roles. So I'll turn it over to her now just to make an additional concept. And Ramadan Mubarak.
Thank you very much, Director, and through you, Chair. Thank you from myself as well for attending. Thank you to everybody who has made the time to come, and yes, Ramadan Mubarak. And I wanted to just echo what Director Buffone said, that we do look at the work that we do as an equity team. And I'm speaking to you because I have the privilege of working with the equity team. So as a superintendent of instruction, that's one of my portfolio areas that I have the good fortune to lead. And really the work that we have been, the way that we do the work, the methodology that we use is to do the work with communities. The delegations all said it so precisely this evening, that it is the lived experience, it's the knowledges that need to be elevated in the work that we're doing so that it can be done in an authentic way. And so where we don't have own voices in some cases on the equity team, we are very intentional about the partnerships that we are forming within the local leaders within the community. And certainly Dr. Sherazi is one of those members, a cherished and invaluable member for our team in our district. So that's the methodology that we use, is to try to work in partnership and in collaboration so that it is reciprocal, so that we are working together. And it definitely benefits us as a team when we do have within our own team complement that expertise and that knowledge. So within our team, we have a collection of student support workers or student support coordinators, as well as equity coaches, instructional coaches. So we have a very a variety of skill sets. And I think the delegation spoke to that as well. The importance isn't so much upon the actual maybe accreditation or the actual distinction of the role itself, as much as it is the skill set and the knowledge and the capacity, certainly the community building. And that bridging piece is the vital piece of the work that we do, because we want it to be sustained. And again, as the delegation said, so that it is work that we're doing because that's the default of how this district operates, that it's not, we don't need to have actual roles assigned. And budget requests for that, because we have built that capacity within all of us for that CRP, or that culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy and methodology. So I'm not sure if there are specific questions, but I do really appreciate the opportunity to thank you and to connect with some of you today, and to continue that work together. And we do welcome the opportunity to ensure that we are continuing to try to get it right. And that is our commitment, is we will always be trying to get it right. And thank you so much.
All right. I do have a couple of speakers. I have Mr. Wong and then Trustee Scott. Do we want to move on to the report, or are these questions in response to the director's comments? Okay. Mr. Wong? Comments in response to the director's comments? Or just general comments? Do we want to save it for when we're discussing the addition or not of this coach? So I suspect we will be discussing having a Muslim equity coach at some point in the agenda. Do you want to save those comments for that time? Okay, Trustee Scott.
Thank you. Through you to staff. I'm just wondering, within the current complement of the equity team, do we have individuals with lived experience, either in terms of being Arabic speakers or in terms of being Muslim?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Farrish, who can give a little more detail, but I believe so, yes.
Great. Thank you very much for the question. Through you, Chair. In our current complement, we do have representation of Muslim identity, and we do have an Arabic-speaking individual who is currently on the team. And as Director Buffone mentioned, through the cycle of renewal of positions, we do have opportunities that are coming up as well.
Thank you.
Trustee Bell, same question. Is this to the director's comments, or you're nodding? So I'm going to say, go ahead.
Yes.
You have the floor.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Clear and direct comment. A question: Do the people that will be in this role have direct experience with anti-Palestinian racism? Because that is the current context that we're seeing right now on the ground. That where I'm hearing from constituents, what they're hearing and seeing, and able to address, watching thousands and thousands of children being killed ultimately on social media. And so will not only the equity coaches but other staff be prepared to address that issue and the impact that is having on their communities. And just lastly, I want to say that last year our student trustee Tabarak was very skillful in working behind the scenes. And I know that Trustee Donna Dickson has also been working behind the scenes to ensure that this type of support is available. And so I'd just like to give a shout out to Tabarak and Trustee Dickson and all others that have been working to ensure that those students are adequately, all students, but in particular those that are facing anti-Palestinian racism and other types of hate are being adequately addressed. Thank you very much for your response, Director.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think Trustee Bell raises a very important point and a huge priority for our organization. I will lean on Superintendent Farrish for some of the detail of the profile of our supports currently, but I will say in response to Trustee Bell's important comments that, Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian racism specifically are priorities for the district, not only for any one individual who may come from that lived experience, and I think that's a valid point, as we heard from the delegations as well as Trustee Bell, but also for all of our equity team in the support we provide more broadly. As one of the delegates mentioned, not only to students of Palestinian origin, but to all students in their learning and their interaction and their growing in a very richly diverse family and organization that we have. So I think it's very well made comments from Trustee Bell. And the answer to the question in short is yes, it is a focus for us as an organization. And I will turn again to Superintendent Farrish around the cadre that we have of talented educators and professionals serving right now.
Question, Trustee Bell, and through you, Chair. And I really appreciate you referencing the good work of Student Trustee Tabarak last year, and certainly the direction that she helped provide for us in making a decision last year to make permanent 2 positions on the equity team with student support coordinators who identify as Muslim. One of them does speak Arabic. With respect to Palestinian identity, we do not have that identity currently on our team, and we have been working directly with the Palestinian Canadian Congress. 2 members of that executive have volunteered their time to work with us on a regular basis, and they are working to support our own learning as an equity team and also to develop resources that will be part of our anti-hate toolkit. So we do have a module on anti-Palestinian racism that we're working to in collaboration with the Palestinian Canadian Congress. So that's an example of when we don't have the lived or own voice on our team membership currently, we ensure that there are authentic engagement opportunities and building our own capacity so that we are all standing up against anti-Palestinian racism.
Any further questions, Trustee Bell?
Just a quick point of clarification. Will we in fact be bringing forth a motion with regard to these coaches tonight, or is this something that is understood that there will be 2 coaches dedicated to what we've heard tonight, to supporting Arab students and Muslim students?
Through Madam Chair, just to reassure Trustee Bell and then the entire Board of Trustees that staff has mentioned and at the outset, this has been on the minds of staff for some time. As Superintendent Farrish has said, the diversity of the equity team is one of its key strengths, and we hear the spirit of the delegations bringing forward that desire to have the support in place. Staff has this identified as a priority as well. And the good news each and every year is we've got renewal of that cycle happening, as mentioned, that can address the needs that have been identified here this evening. So staff very much in support of what the delegations have brought forward, has this in its plan for that annual renewal to complement the existing cadre of professionals we have. So appreciate the query from Trustee Bell here and reassurance from staff that we've understood the spirit of the message and have it in our sights for our planning forward.
Trustee Bell, you're good.
Sorry, point of order, Chair. I didn't hear an answer to Trustee Bell's question. Are we hearing about this position tonight or at a future meeting?
So amendments to the academic staffing plan are in order. If somebody wanted to make an amendment to the academic staffing plan, you can. Academic staffing plan is next on the agenda at 6.1. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wong.
Yes, I would like to bring forth my comments to Director Buffone. First of all, I'd like to thank all the time of delegates to bring such an important issue that is so important and yet very complex. The issue is something that, in support of the coaches, I believe really needs attention that goes beyond something just for 3 coaches. It requires something, possibly something that needs, first of all, the attention of the Ministry of Ontario, because it is just, it's beyond just coaches for each board. It can't, it's too much on their shoulders, and it requires something where it's revision of the programming, the syllabus, because there's a lot of content that could be looked over, whether it's up to date, and it's very, I had the luck of studying at a doctoral level under some of the two of the considered among the best professors in the area of conflict management, international area, in the area of international conflict management also. And it is a very, very complex issue, and include in this area of the area of this particular area. And there's a lot of interdisciplinary aspects. It is just very complex, and to even bring it to the attention of the students, it's very enriching. It's not just for Arabic studies issues, it's just for their whole life, the well-being of all the students in their life in general. And so it is something that it brings to their whole well-being and to all aspects of their career. And to as a global community, as to all the workplace of getting along together and leadership, and it's well worth it. And it's also helpful when we're looking at reevaluating things. It helps to look at professional day training, because that's where at the end of the day is also on a practical sense where one can retool things and work through any misunderstandings, the complexity. Now, going into that, it's a very complex issue. There's so many complexities to it. I believe it requires more than just, for example, the one group like the Palestinian group. It requires, there's so many geographic entities in the Arabic community. There's also and you're not just talking about the Arabic community, there's the Jewish community getting involved. So you're talking so many different regions, countries in the Arabic community that are involved. For example, one that's often underlooked is the Yemen community. That's very touched. There's many other, as earlier mentioned, there's other ones mentioned. So, and so many children are touched and often underrepresented, and that could be affected. And so moving very quickly, so subject matter experts of the highest caliber, and different ones, and then working with the equity committee and the sub-working groups, and then working also with the media. I read the not just Canadian news, they're in this subject area very thoroughly, but also international news, and the Canadian media could work considerably more on covering this topic in much more different angles, and getting them involved, having them involved with the different subject matter experts to see if they can cover this much more thoroughly. It makes really a big difference, because I believe there is a big gap. And that said, so working together and having the community at large from different groups working all together and taking that time would make all the difference for the students, for their well-being, all the students.
Do you have a comment, Director?
Very briefly, Mr. Ron, couldn't agree more. I think that's what Superintendent Farrish was getting at, that although there are specific skill sets and some student groups that do have priority need for us, it's the team working together and relying on community input, the agencies and organizations that support. We would never have a team big enough to address all the different identities that we have. And so we've got to balance the specific supports, and we've understood the spirit of what's being required this evening, with some flexibility to have a diverse group with every renewal annually. So really appreciate the spirit of what you're saying. There's scope and sequence, and I'll do this very briefly, but the integration of culturally responsive, I think it was Menasheh who said, the culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy and the integration of lived experiences into the curriculum really bring to life the connection of our students and their strengths that are diverse and serve all students is going to be at the forefront and continues to be at the forefront of Superintendent Farrish and the equity team's work. So appreciate your comments. It's very much in the spirit of the work we want to do, but understand that that team's flexibility to adapt annually to the needs of as we move forward is critical for us as an organization. So really appreciate your comments.
Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. So from my perspective, there's nothing overly complex about this situation. The community is here. The community has expressed what the need is, and it's not complicated. Are we going to be able to accommodate their request?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes.
I see no further speakers. That takes us to item 6.1 on our agenda. I'm going to ask Director Buffone to introduce report 24-018.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I would like to turn this over to Superintendent Hall, who will take us through academic staffing for the upcoming school year.
Good evening. Through you, Madam Chair, it is my pleasure to come back this evening to present the academic staffing report for decision by the Board of Trustees. I have for you this evening a very brief PowerPoint. As you know, we had a great discussion at the last meeting about the academic staffing plan. So I wanted to leave as much time as needed for conversation or questions, and we'll work through these slides very briefly. Next. So this slide provides the overall staffing complement. As you know, 80% of the total academic staffing complement is required by either class size or regulation, and is always based on our enrollment, our student enrollment projections. So what you're seeing before you here is our elementary and secondary staffing, which includes our discretionary and our required. And we're looking at a total of 5,025.66 full-time FTE in this academic staffing budget. Next slide, please. You will see we discussed this at the last budget meeting, a slight adjustment, a slight reduction in the number of FTE. It's 15.06. It was 16 last time because we had an adjustment that we had to account for related to administrators for the new schools. We had double counted one half-time administrators, so a small adjustment there. And we're looking at a modest increase of the 15.06 positions, which is about close to $2 million. Next. We covered this in great detail last time, so I will just go through it quickly. The allocations you see here, in addition to our current requirement, is 3.58, and this is to cover the new administrators for our new schools, Finley Creek, Stittsville, and Riverside South. Next. Again, we covered this extensively in the last meeting. In terms of special education recommended changes, we're looking at an additional 5.66 FTE in secondary and 2.81 in elementary. And finally, on the last slide here, we had discussed the 3.0 positions related to elementary staffing to support the business and learning technologies coaches positions. So with that, I am happy to provide any answers to any questions that trustees have, or some of my colleagues here who have expertise on the different portfolios will also be able to support trustees in their questions. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm going to start a speaker list. Before I do, can I get a mover for the recommendation? I see Trustee Lee. All right. I have Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Chair. Through you first, thank you for bringing this report forward, and happy to be back here having these conversations with the community. I'm wondering, well, first I'd like to share that I'm concerned that we only have one Indigenous itinerant education teacher, or one FTE, sorry, and I don't see an increase. And I'm wondering if we could get comment from staff on whether or not we need to increase that, if this one FTE is supporting the Indigenous community appropriately, and if not, where can we provide additional support, if not in academic staffing?
So through you, Chair, Superintendent Smith, I don't believe is with us this evening. However, there are more positions that support instruction within the Indigenous team. So the Indigenous team has a number of positions. I know I can go through the list I have here. There is one coach. There are one coach K-12. And a coach, which is also listed as itinerant for K-8. There are other student support coordinators as well to support the Indigenous students. So we also have three specifically Indigenous student support coordinators. I do know there is an identity-specific social worker as well. And so I think there's quite a few resources to support students, and without the details in front of me about the various positions and roles they take, I can't be very specific. What I can tell you though, Trustee Aziz, is in our conversations and deliberations around trying to make a determination of what supports were needed, it wasn't flagged specifically to come forward with Indigenous specific student supports in this particular budget conversation. And what I can also tell you is during the course of the year, there has been additional resources and structural changes added to increase the complement of the Indigenous team. For example, a manager that is supporting the community on more of the I'm going to say business side of the organization, but mostly to do with community partnerships and supporting students and families through community partnerships. That's a brand new position for us. And certainly Superintendent Smith has moved forward a lot of pieces related to human resources supports that aren't representative in this specific report because it wouldn't fall under this report. So what I can say is it didn't come forward as a need, but there are many supports that have been put in place over the course of the year in the last few years, as you know.
Thank you for that response. It's something that is kind of weighing on me in terms of providing better support for our Indigenous students. If not in this part of the budget process, it certainly will continue to be a concern I would like to express throughout the rest of this budget cycle. My next question is regarding the equity support staff that was raised during the delegations this evening. Would that staff member be identified in this part of the budget process? And if so, where?
Okay, through you, Chair. Thank you so much. And I appreciated the conversation and delegations very much this evening. And as Superintendent Buffone, Director, I demoted you. Apologies. Director Buffone has mentioned this has been on our radar, and certainly hearing the community come and share their perspectives this evening really aligns with what we know has been shared as a need. And Superintendent Farrish as well has this kind of already in her work plan, if you will. So you'll see that we have approximately 23 elementary coaches and 25 secondary coaches, give or take. Some are called itinerant. There's kind of nuances around those. So the intention, as I understand it, is that through the renewal of some of those positions, we are able to utilize the turnover of those positions to find the identity-specific supports that have been discussed this evening. So humbly, if I could share my perspective on this, I think it can be done within our existing complement because there will be renewals of those 3-year terms. And so understanding the needs, we can certainly position those to fill the gaps that we know we have, and we can do it within these numbers because there's a natural turnover cycle. So I don't see it from where I sit being a need to add, but we need to be very intentional about aligning with the needs that have been raised.
Thank you. Are all of those instructional staff members on the 3-year cycle or just some of them?
So through you, Chair, like everything at the district, it's never an absolute for any one thing we do. I would say in general, the expectation is the 3-year cycle. That's typically the cycle we work with. When we've had instances where we know that the system and the students, the supports that are needed from an individual to be expanded to a 4th year, in some rare cases a 5th year, we do allow for that. So we do an analysis, we see what the needs are, and we have kept individuals on for longer terms. But the benefit to certainly bringing someone in to do that central work is, as the trustees and the community has shared, getting that lived experience, getting that voice, and being able to share that and help educate others at the system level so that changes can be made for all students. And so also that individual going back to the school setting is really beneficial to the school based on that expertise. So essentially 3 years. It depends. It can go longer, but typically that's what we have as a cycle.
Through you, Madam Chair, just adding to Superintendent Hall's point, and I appreciate Trustee Aziz's query, there have been times in the past in the district where we've had a very complex initiative where we've kept a coach on because the transition at that time would put that progress of an initiative in peril. Example for the Board of Trustees many years ago, the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board was the banker board, the lead board for the Common European Framework of Reference Initiative around an assessment called the DELF, the Diplôme d'études en langue française. We kept not the entire coach team, but a few of the coaches on for a lengthier period of time to see that initiative through. So Superintendent Hall is spot on. We've got a regular cycle, but things happen. People take on other initiatives. Sometimes coaches or others say to us, I'd really like to go back to a school because an opening has come in an area that I've really been looking for. So that it's never perfect, but the idea is to have a mix of new and experience. But there are times when we intentionally double up that term because of the nature of an initiative as well. And I just wanted to bring that to the trustees' attention that there are times when we purposely extend.
Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Director, and thank you, Superintendent. I would like to make an amendment to the recommendation on the floor.
Do you have language?
Yes, and
Okay.
would it be easier for me to send it to Manager Guthrie?
I know other people also have proposed language, so
Okay.
I'm going to call a 5-minute recess. So all the people who have changes on this topic can figure out the language that they like in agreement and can
Sure.
bring one amendment to the table, okay?
Okay.
So 5-minute recess or until everybody has an agreement. Trustee Aziz, you had 1 minute and 51 seconds left on your clock when we broke for recess. So you have 1 minute and 51 seconds starting whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll I propose an amendment to the recommendation on the floor, and we'll wait for Manager Guthrie to kindly pull up the language for folks to see. Please and thank you. I will now turn introduction to the amendment to our student trustee.
Student trustee.
So through you, Chair, the amendment is that the Addendum and Appendix B to Report 24-018 be revised to reflect the additional allocation of 1.0 FTE resource to support students who identify as Muslim. And if, can I add something right now?
Yes.
A
This
comment
is
or
your amendment?
Yeah, just like a comment.
Yes.
And basically, like, I just wanted to add that this is something that I've heard from many, many students, and it is something that the previous student trustee has been working on, and it really aligns also with another, like, so some of the things that as the Senate we're currently working on. So I think it is worth consideration.
Okay. Are there any other speakers to this amendment?
Sorry, point of order, Chair. Can I just make the spelling correction who identify as Muslim? Sorry. Just want to make the language crystal clear. Thank you.
Trustee Dickson, you had a hand up? Okay, you have the floor. you should turn on your mic.
I'm sorry, Chair. Yes, I do have an amendment to amend to this. Madam Gundry, could you put that on the screen for me, please? So Muslim and Arab identity and or Arab speaking. I think this would work to have one, and then within we can always add another. But
All right, this has been introduced. Do we have, starting with, is this amendment friendly? I see someone shaking their head. This is not friendly. This sub-amendment is not friendly, which means we're going to start a speakers list. I see Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Chair. I really think we should have one FTE resource to support students who identify as Muslim and one FTE support to support students who identify as, who are Arab identifying and or Arabic speaking. I think it's important to support both communities because they often overlap and there is often intersection, but they are often not one in the same. We have French speaking Muslims, we have English speaking Muslims, but we also have Arab identifying students who aren't Muslim. I think clumping them together might put too much of an overlap on that FTE, whether it's one staff member or two, to support both groups who may sometimes have needs that aren't necessarily met all at once. And that could be very challenging for that staff member or for those two staff members, whoever that might be, especially considering the delegations we heard tonight. There is significant need for a Muslim FTE and Arab identifying and or Arabic speaking FTE. And the challenges we've heard tonight are immense. And I don't think it's fair to put that kind of weight on just one FTE, whether that's one physical person or two part-time. But for those reasons, I think it would be important to have one of each. Thank you.
Okay. I have Susan Gardner, and then I have Trustee Bell, and then I have Trustee Milburn. These are all on the sub-amendment. Not hearing any objections. Susan Gardner.
I'll pass, thanks. I had another question.
All right. Trustee Bell.
I think we heard loud and clear from our delegations tonight that there's a need for specifically an Arab speaking identifying FTE, and we also heard that there is a need for an FTE to support Muslim students. I was speaking with someone from the community today who is Palestinian and Christian, and those are two distinct identities. And again, I completely support Aisha, Trustee Aziz, in stating that putting that many intersectionalities on one person is too much. We've heard a need. There's, I think, again, I haven't had the statistics given to me yet by the staff, but I think if you look at the percentage of population of Arab identifying students and Muslim students, you're going to see it's a very large percentage of our school population. And the very least we could do is give one FTE to each. Thanks.
Okay. Trustee Milburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to echo my colleagues' comments on, I think that having two different FTEs, one for Muslim and one for Arab identifying or Arab speaking students, is necessary. But I would like to ask if staff have a comment on the proposed amendment and how they feel about combining these two.
Director or Superintendent Hall, whichever you would like to take it.
Sure, I'll start, then I'll turn it over to Superintendent Hall or Superintendent Farrish. Appreciate the spirit of what the Board of Trustees is looking at doing this evening. Just a couple of comments for the Board of Trustees to consider. It would be virtually impossible for the board and staff's perspective, as well as for staff, to meet every single potential intersectionality of identities in the allocation of instructional coach or other resource positions. I think the motion here of adding an FTE, along with the complement that exists, will get to the spirit of the needs, rightly so, as mentioned through the delegations and the other queries from the Board of Trustees, because it does become difficult for staff over time to then have the flexibility to adapt to any other need. Should something happen in South America next year, and we are met with incoming students that we're not talking about this evening, our ability to pivot to address those needs then becomes increasingly difficult. So although I understand that the spirit of attempting to get to all of the possible combinations, what's on the floor as a motion, and the flexibility within the team right now, I think, can get to the spirit of that. With every increasing splintering of the supports, becomes less and less ability to flex if the district needs to over time. So staff is very much in favor and support of a motion to address the needs we heard, but I do need the Board of Trustees to understand that if things change and global events happen quickly, the ability of staff to then respond because we've locked things in becomes more difficult. So I want to put that on the table for the Board of Trustees, because I know in today's discussion that's really important. What we're addressing is a need. We've got to make sure we don't set up the organization to then be really in a difficult position to maneuver and adapt. And I think there's a balance there that we can hold as staff. So again, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Hall and Superintendent Farrish. I just want to make sure we're careful not be able to then respond to future needs, but totally appreciate the spirit of the need we're addressing this evening.
Through you, Chair, thank you. And because I believe Superintendent Farrish has covered already the existing supports on the team, that maybe it might be beneficial to go through the existing complement to ensure that the need is covered as it was shared this evening. So Superintendent Farrish, would you be able to speak to the current identity-based supports on the team?
Sure. Thank you. Through you, Chair. So in terms of sort of reflecting on the amendment and the sub-amendment, I do feel like this allows us to use the complement that we have currently. So we have 2 student support workers or student support coordinators who identify as Muslim. One of them speaks Arabic. I think the addition of looking at bringing somebody onto the team that identifies as Arab and speaks Arabic is a really key piece that would be a good benefit. As I mentioned, we do currently have, and that was due to the work of Student Trustee Tabarak last year, we do currently have 2 student support coordinators who identify as Muslim. So I think really looking for that identity that's Arab affirming is really key there, and certainly that's something that we're already planning on doing with the hiring opportunities that we will have. This motion certainly supports that. Thank you.
Executive Officer.
Through you, Madam Chair, in developing the motion, and perhaps we should have explained this at the outset, initially both of the movers indicated a desire to find the FTE from within. And Superintendent Farrish indicated, we do have some capacity within. As the scope grew, we narrowed to the addition of 1 FTE, recognizing, as the director and superintendent have explained, that we could support the full scope of the work through the existing complement plus 1 FTE. So just for the board's clarification, not everybody heard that part of the conversation.
All right. I have Trustee Scott, Trustee Jennekens, and then Mr. Wong, and then Trustee Aziz is a second-time speaker.
First through you, a question for clarification, and that is in terms of the language of the sub-amendment, does that leave sufficient flexibility, but make it clear that both of these needs can be supported with the addition of 1.0, although it may not necessarily be that additional person who fulfills both needs.
Director?
Through you, Madam Chair, Trustee Scott's interpretation is mine as well, but I do look to Superintendent Hall and Superintendent Farrish to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding here. But I do read it as Trustee Scott has suggested.
Through you, Chair, I'm in agreement with your interpretation, Trustee Scott.
So just to be clear then, we are not talking about a 1.0 FTE who would necessarily be the one person who did Muslim and supported Arab identifying and Arabic speaking students, but it would be one person being added to the team that it would make it possible to support students who identify as Muslim and Arab identifying and or Arabic speaking students. Am I correct on that?
Director?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes.
Thank you. I will be supporting the amendment.
All right. Trustee Jennekens.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add on to Trustee Scott, so what we heard from the delegations this evening is it's that cultural lived experience that is most important in providing support to our students. So I am in favor of this amendment. Certainly in my community, Finley Creek, we have a strong community that will be very much appreciative of this additional support. And but again, just as our delegates were saying earlier, it's that cultural lived experience, whether or not the ability to speak Arabic. It's more about that understanding of that that life experience that really is more important in my personal opinion. Thank you.
Okay. I have Trustee Bell. Nope. All right. I have Trustee Aziz again.
Sorry, I thought Mr. Wong was on the list as well. Ahead
He
of
is,
me
yes, sorry.
as a first time
Mr.
speaker.
Wong.
I'm not sure if I understood, but tying into Trustee Scott's comments, it's maybe being able to push past the 1.0 FTE is with all the recent good efforts of the board in terms of equity, hiring for the different supports for various efforts for supporting the teachers across the board for different initiatives, including where on the committee I am on the special education, is that and with in terms of equity overall, is that look in terms of initiatives there, ensuring equity is looking at, so in terms of that, in terms of special support, is looking at, it is challenging to do that, but looking at integrating the numbers and trying to integrate equity representation into that special support. So trying to increase that number beyond that 1.0, maybe even past 3.0 into the special supports. And that's not necessarily just Muslim, it could be in other groups too. So you have more representation and just broadly, just generic, based on equity numbers one wants to achieve. And then as Director mentioned, if there is suddenly something that springs up based on suddenly something that is a priority, then be able to focus on that. And looking at from that perspective, how one could look at it as a possibility. And then another perspective is at the ministerial level again, where providing support for all the teachers is really professional development training and program support, because it's regardless of equity based on ethnicity. It's really all the teachers being trained, and that's really touching all the students, because at the end of the day,
Mr. Wong, you're out of time. Would you like to go back on the speakers list? You can go back and speak to it again.
Oh, it's okay. I think I covered everything.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have Trustee Presley.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Thank you very much to everyone for the language on this amendment. I would like to state that I would love to see the addition of 2 FTE roles, one specifically for Muslim identifying students and one specifically for Arab speaking or Arabic identifying students. However, given our staffing
I'm going to pause you for a second. We're only on the sub-amendment. You can't have a second sub-amendment on the floor while there's a sub-amendment on the floor.
I understand, Chair. I'm not making a sub-amendment.
Okay. Sorry. Go ahead, continue.
No worries. However, based on our current staffing complement, I would be happy to support this with knowledge in future that we will ensure that if the ability opens up for us to add an additional complement and maybe expand these positions, I would support that in the future as well. Thank you.
All right. I see Trustee Milburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So after listening to the discussion around the table, I just want to clarify, and I apologize, it must have been a long day. So we are adding one more additional on top of the 3 additional coaches to our complement of equity coaches that we are adding, correct?
So this discussion is about adding the words "and Arab identifying and or Arabic speaking students" to the amendment. So if this sub-amendment passes, we would add the purple text, which is kind of tough to see against the black, but we would add the purple text to the amendment. Then we would discuss the amendment.
Okay, I guess I will wait for the actual amendment discussion.
Trustee Bell, I still see a hand. Okay. Seeing no further speakers to the sub-amendment.
Sorry, I had asked to be a second-time speaker after Mr. Wong.
Yes, sorry, Trustee Aziz.
Thank you very much, Chair. And again, speaking specifically to the sub-amendment, I don't disagree that we need an Arab identifying and or Arabic speaking support staff. I think they just need to be different. It doesn't mean that one of our Arabic and or Arab identifying support staff isn't Muslim, and it doesn't mean that one of our Muslim support staff aren't Arabic or Arab identifying. It's important to identify that those 2 specific identities have separate barriers and areas of discrimination that those communities are facing. And if we clump them together, I'm concerned that Arabic and Arab speaking students might not feel comfortable going to a support staff who might identify as Muslim or vice versa. We know that 20% of our students are JK to 6 parents identify as Muslim, and that grade 7 to 12, based on our Valuing Voices survey, 19% identify as Muslim. Having that support is incredibly important, as we've heard from delegations tonight. And as a Muslim graduate of the OCDSB, trying to explain to my teachers why I was fainting during gym class because I was a Muslim student who was fasting, I wasn't Arabic or Arabic speaking, was so difficult, because at that time we didn't have the kind of education. Saying Ramadan Mubarak would have meant nothing. But because we've made such strides, having that kind of conversation tonight is so important. And I'm getting very emotional. I'm so sorry. And I think it's so important that our Muslim students, whether they identify as Somali, whether they identify as Canadian or French, have somebody to go to explain their experiences as someone from that religious group, and not just someone from, and like I said, they're both important, but I think the opportunity here to have both is important. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further speakers to this item, Trustee Dickson, you have wrap up.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I think what I'd really like to say is we're looking for somebody in a support position that's Arabic speaking and Muslim focused equity coach for the board. That's the position that we're looking for. And I think that would only entail it being one with the help of other coaches within the equity portfolio. So I would like everybody to support it. Thank you.
All right. Wrap-up has concluded. I'm now going to call a vote. Would all those in favor of the sub-amendment, remember that is the purple text on the screen, please raise your hand. All right. Would all those opposed please raise their hands? All right, and that carries. Yeah. All right, that brings us back to the amendment in its totality. I have Trustee Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to, as we're talking about academic staffing, and this is only while we do need to get this wrapped up in order to meet our collective agreement requirements, this is only a portion of the budget, and adding an additional FTE to the overall budget. I'd kind of like to hear how that would impact the overall budget, considering that this is a staff, this is going to impact our decision-making in the rest of the budgeting process.
Director?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll turn it over to Associate Director Giroir just for a comment on the overall budget, the context of this particular motion, the overall budget.
Through you, Chair. I think I mentioned in the previous budget meeting that the financial landscape is still pretty unsteady, and it's probably even further unsteady for OCDSB because of the Bill 124 payments that are coming through and the impact on what that will have in the current year plus the future year, plus the fact that we haven't received the technical papers to put our enrollment into EFIS to kind of see where we are from a financial perspective. I am a little concerned with too much addition to the academic staffing plan. We could add an FTE at a later point in time once we had better clarity on what our financial position is. I think that staff did mention that they could accommodate this requirement with the existing positions they have. And if we found ourselves in a situation once the technical papers dropped and there was more clarity on Bill 124, if that would be the time to consider adding an additional coach. I don't think it would have any significant impact on the overall academic staffing. And we've done things like that in the past. So my personal recommendation would be to have us address this concern within the existing resources and potentially add resources once we had better clarity on what the financial position, because this actually might generate a cut somewhere else within the organization that we don't even understand, because once we get the rest of the information, and if we're $2 million short, I'm going to be looking for $2 million in the current program that we're delivering, and that will mean reductions in areas that we might not be as comfortable making.
Director?
Through you, Madam Chair, just a commentary from Superintendent Hall on the timing of positions relative to the collective agreements, just so that it's clear for the Board of Trustees if there's any consideration on that front.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So we do know that we need to pass the academic staffing plan, ideally at this meeting, so we can meet those collective agreement timelines. We certainly, as the Associate Director has referenced, in the second part of the budget, there obviously is another opportunity to have a discussion related to resources that fall outside the complement of academic staff specifically. Essentially, for a decision that would impact the academic staffing component, that needs to be made imminently.
Okay. Trustee Lee?
Thank you. So in that regard, and I agree with the sentiment around on the table about having the supports, and hearing from the delegation say they're seeking that support. Since the academic staffing budget is for educators, and we've heard from the delegation that they're looking for people with the skill set that might not necessarily be a teacher or an educator. There are people outside of teachers and educators who have the skill set necessary for this role. And we've already discussed that within the equity team that there is capacity to support that. I'm proposing a sub-amendment to strike the word additional for now, that in this academic staffing, we are saying that within the equity team, we're directing staff to consider that within the current academic staffing. And when we get to the second part of the budget process, where we're discussing the other resources that are not teachers, that we might revisit this topic, where we have other possible resources that we can get from other types of staff potentially.
All right, a sub-amendment is on the floor that you strike the word additional.
Correct.
All right. I'm going to start a speakers list on the new sub-amendment. I have Trustee Blackburn, Trustee Bell, Trustee Presley, Trustee Jennekens, Trustee Dickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. I will be supporting this amendment. I agree with Trustee Lee on several fronts, and keeping in mind what the CFO has said. This is the beginning of the budget process, not the end. Additionally, I'm concerned that if we add this position, that we may forego the opportunity to hire the best person for the job, and that person might not necessarily be a teacher. It could be somebody else in the community who would best serve the Muslim community. So I would like to keep our opportunities more open than strictly having to be a teacher. And from a fiscal point of view too, I'd rather have all the information before us, before we make a decision on adding things, because at this stage, if we add things, we can't take away. But in the second stage of our budget process, we can add things, and we can add them knowing that we don't have to cut other essential supports to students. But mainly, I don't want to tie our hands and insist that this be a teacher, that we hire the best person for the Muslim community. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sorry, point of order, Chair. This is my amendment, and I think this is a friendly sub-amendment, but I didn't see that question called on the floor if it was friendly, and I think it is. It sounds like there is concession on the floor, but want to double check.
Is it a friendly amendment to strike the word additional? Because I had 5 speakers jump up, so I assume people wanted to talk about it.
Superintendent Hall.
Oh, I'm not saying whether or not it's friendly. Sorry.
Okay.
I just wanted to jump in to make one point before the motion is voted on. I believe we should remove reference to Appendix B. So right now, Appendix A talks about elementary, Appendix B talks about secondary. We wouldn't want to limit it only to secondary teachers. So if we could strike that as well, it would open it up to either K to 12, essentially.
Then we will come back to that after we deal with the thing on the floor. So back to the item on the floor, and that is the removing of the word additional friendly?
I just had a question, which I think Superintendent Hall just maybe answered, but I want to be sure. Because if there's no reference to a specific kind of position in the report, then I'm not sure that the first part is relevant anymore. So can we, in fact, deal with this particular sub-amendment separately?
So right now, the question on the floor is the removal of the word additional friendly? And we need to deal with that before we can deal with anything else on the floor.
Except that removing the word additional does not necessarily make any, leave a motion that makes any sense, because even with a sub-amendment, we still want to have something that actually makes sense.
That sounds like a good idea, like a good reason for it not to be friendly and then vote it down.
And voting it down would not preclude a further sub-amendment, which would include this plus the additional changes.
Mm-hmm.
It is not friendly.
Okay. I still have Trustee Presley, Trustee Jennekens, Trustee Dickson, and Trustee Aziz to this item. Trustee Presley.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, if I may, I missed some of what Trustee Scott had just stated, and I feel as though it was quite important. Would you mind giving me a little summary?
Sure. So, Trustee Scott, do you want to give your own synopsis, or would you like me to do it?
Thank you.
You go ahead.
All right. Trustee Scott has said that striking the word additional doesn't make sense with the inclusion of the appendices and amendum. And so if you want to strike one, you need to strike both. Is that a fair synopsis? I'm seeing some nodding.
Okay. May you put me back on the list as an additional speaker?
Sure.
Thank you.
That brings us to Trustee Jennekens.
Thank you, Chair. And I think I'm clear on all of this. What I did want to say is, though, I am in agreement of removing the additional based on what Associate Director Gerard, Trustee Lee mentioned, and Trustee Blackburn. I agree with Trustee Blackburn that we do want the very best and person to support our Muslim Arabic community. So perhaps waiting for the second part is prudent to ensure. And perhaps in the short term, we can within our educators. You know, there's someone who in the short term perhaps can support our students, because we've heard loud and clear this evening that we need to solve this problem and really support our students and families.
All right, Trustee Dickson.
Through you, Chair. I'm gonna go with what Superintendent Hall said in taking out Appendix B, and also just leaving the additional the additional in that.
So we can't strike. We've already procedurally. We have an amendment on the floor. We have a sub-amendment on the floor. We can't add further sub-amendments. So we have to defeat the thing on the floor, and then we can make a second sub-amendment that removes all the words you want.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Chair. I was just speaking with my colleague about supporting the sub-amendment only if we are going to strike Addendum and Appendix B from the motion. So I will not support this sub-amendment, but will support a sub-amendment that removes both the words additional and Addendum and Appendix B so that it all makes sense in one go.
Okay. I have Trustee Presley as a second-time speaker.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I will wait and see if there's any suggestions as to the language on the floor.
Okay. We've reached the end of our speakers list. Do you want wrap up? Trustee?
I will correct that in the next. I should still have the floor after this. We'll take another crack at this after.
Okay. I'm going to call all those in favor of this amendment. All right, all those opposed? And this amendment fails. Trustee Lee, the floor is still yours.
Can I move for a request or move a 5-minute recess to have Executive Officer Giroux make sure that the amendment is correct?
Yes, but I'd like to keep our 5-minute recess to 5 minutes.
Okay.
So, Trustee Lee.
All right. So we've propose a sub-amendment to strike the references and to strike the word additional along with some minor grammatical errors that were identified in the existing amendment. So as you can see there, striking the addendum and appendix to the report, that's striking the reference, striking the word additional, and making it clear that it's a commitment of 1.0 resources, and then the rest is a grammatical revision.
To support students who identify as Muslim, Arab, and or Arabic speaking. Okay. Let's start with, is this friendly? If this is not friendly, please use your voice. I see some hands. If it is not friendly, use your voice. Because I assume you're on the speakers list for the main amendment. All right. Trustee Presley, is this not friendly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I would actually like to make a sub-amendment to the sub-amendment.
Can't sub-amend a sub-amendment.
Okay.
So either we have to accept this or defeat this.
Okay, I'll wait.
All right. Are there any speakers to this amendment? Sub-amendment. Seeing no Trustee Aziz.
I think this is a fair sub-amendment and I will be supporting it.
Okay. Sorry, did you want introduction? Okay. Seeing no other speakers to the sub-amendment. Sorry, Trustee Bell. No. All right. I'm going to call a vote. All those in favor of this sub-amendment. And that passes. All right. Trustee Lee, floor is still yours.
Now I'm done.
All right. Back to the main amendment. I have Trustee Jennekens, Trustee Bell, Trustee Presley on the main amendment. Are there any other speakers? You can, okay. I now have Trustee Bell, Trustee Presley. Trustee Bell.
I'd like to make a sub-amendment to the motion on the floor.
All right, you have the floor. What is your language?
I would like to add Palestinian, comma, Muslim. Muslim is
to
already
clarify,
on there.
You want Palestinian, comma, before the word Muslim?
Yes.
So right there. Okay. First question, is this friendly? If it's not friendly, use your voice. That sounds friendly. All right. So well, I can't spell. So, all right. So having heard no objection, this sub-amendment is carried. Back onto the amendment as a whole. Trustee Bell, the floor is still yours.
If I still have the floor, thank you through you, Chair. While I'm here, and I think Trustee Presley would likely support this as well, I'm going to ask that another sub-amendment to FTE resources to support students. So from 1 to 2, we heard loud and clear from the delegates that there are many intersectionalities that are present and that are needing the support right now. We also heard from our colleague, Aisha Aziz, that she would not necessarily feel comfortable going to speak to someone that didn't understand the specifics of her experience as a Muslim student in the OCDSB. That to me is an incredibly compelling argument for there to be 2 resources being dedicated to this. And I will be voting in support of it in order to support my colleague Aisha and the sensitive information that she shared with us today. Thank you.
Can I get clarification, Trustee Bell, on if you mean 2 within the existing complement or if you mean 1 more than exists in the existing complement?
It is 2 FTE resources to support students, dedicated resources.
So this motion, this amendment as it stands, is not increasing the complement because there is an existing team. It is specifying within the existing team that somebody meet these requirements.
Yes.
By changing it
And
to
so
two,
yes.
Are you asking that two within the existing complement, or are you asking that one more be added to the complement? I wasn't clear.
Two within the existing complement. We heard, I believe, from our human resources department today that that would be in fact possible. And we heard from Mary Jane Farrish, I believe, as well.
Director.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm just looking to Superintendent Farrish and Superintendent Hall to confirm whether that is indeed possible within our complement.
Sorry, thank you through you, Chair. That's what Superintendent Hall and I were just confirming, just to look at the terms of the contracts that we have. So we do have 2 positions that will be up for renewal.
Confirm that is a yes.
Our current complement of the entire staff on the team, there will be 2 positions up for renewal.
Okay.
So through you, Madam Chair, that is therefore mathematically feasible that the spirit and intent of the motion can be achieved.
All right. Trustee Bell, so you'd like to change 1 to 2.
That is correct.
Let's start with, is that friendly? I see 1 no that it is not friendly, so I will begin a speakers list. All right. Speakers to the sub-amendment. Trustee Blackburn.
So I'm not sure that I'm friendly or unfriendly. It was more a question of clarification. So through you, Madam Chair, to the Director, to Superintendent Farrish, these 2 positions, they are equity coaches and they would be teachers, correct?
Chair, I'm speaking about 2 academic staffing positions. Also, within the complement that we do currently have, and will have next year, 2 individuals who identify as Muslim, 1 individual who speaks Arabic, and those will be status quo for next year. With 2 positions up for renewal, and they do come into the complement of academic staffing, so they would be teacher positions.
Sorry, Madam Chair, so what I hear you saying is you're already meeting this requirement?
Chair, when I look at the identifiers.
Yep.
So we do have 2 individuals who identify as Muslim, 1 individual who speaks Arabic.
Oh, okay.
That is our current complement in terms of the identifiers in the sub-amendment.
Okay. So then you would be looking for somebody who would fulfill the Palestinian requirement.
According to the sub-amendment, it looks as if it's an and/or. We would absolutely be looking to hire individuals who would represent all of and not necessarily the same individual.
Yeah, right.
But yes, to ensure that we're looking for the scope that you have asked us to look for. I just can't guarantee who's going to apply, what that looks like, as we talked about the skill set that's really essential.
Yeah, I guess that's my question to you. Is it in order to meet, to get this support, would it necessarily be through these positions, or is there another way to get this support on your team, i.e. not teachers?
So through you, Chair, Trustee Blackburn, I think that maybe speaks to the idea of looking at another opportunity later on in the budget process where we would be talking about non-academic staffing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I will be supporting this sub-amendment because it sounds like the motion on the floor, if passed, is completely feasible under the existing resources and is supported by staff. And they have expressed such sincere gratitude and genuine appreciation for our delegations tonight. And I can see them whispering back and forth, trying their dearest to really meet the needs that we've heard from our community members, from what we heard around the table. It sounds like it makes perfect sense to make the sub-amendment and then pass this amendment to ensure that we as trustees are being held accountable and doing what is right for our community and moving forward in the right steps to continue to support our students and learn in the best ways possible. So I appreciate everyone's patience tonight as we wordsmith the very boring yet important parts of our jobs. Thank you very much to everyone who is spending another evening during Ramadan listening to us ramble, but this is so, so important. And I think I'm really grateful for the sub-amendment, and I really hope that my colleagues around the table will support it.
Trustee Scott.
Thank you. As a trustee, I know that we have significant diversity within the equity team. I'm never sure exactly how many people are involved in the equity team or exactly what all of the positions are and how it divides itself among people who are principals or teachers or are in other positions who may actually have teacher qualifications but are not on the roster as teachers because being a teacher is not part of that particular job description. So within this context, in terms of the academic staffing specifically, would we be seeing a loss of support for some other group with this change that could not be fulfilled elsewhere?
Director?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll turn over to Superintendent Farrish because with every increasing allocation that the flexibility that does get reduced, and that was the point I was trying to make earlier, but I'll turn over to Superintendent Farrish on where we are specifically for this upcoming school year.
Through you, Chair, and thank you, Director. Intersectionality plays such a key role in identities and supporting students. I will say that I don't believe this would represent a significant loss in terms of representation due to some other positions that we do have. We also have graduation coach positions that are specific for identities. We also work to partner, as was introduced earlier, in areas where we need more direct connection to community voice and also identity specific realities. So I don't see this as being a significant loss. I will say that the vacancies that are coming up for renewal, because they don't currently share those identities, they have other identities that probably won't mesh with these identities, but we do have other roles.
Thank you very much for that response. I think it's important to remember that this is a team. It is not just one of these and one of those and one of those and one of those. And the whole team does a lot of its work together and shares knowledge and practice. So I'm somewhat reassured by Superintendent Farrish's response that this will be manageable and still be able to produce a good result.
All right. Superintendent Hall.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'll just add to Superintendent Farrish's comments that just a reminder about the positions and that the academic staffing positions, so these coach positions are instructional coach positions. And what I heard this evening as well is specific reference to community supports and to a place where students could go and outreach support. that lends itself to the job of a community support coordinator, which would come in the second part of the budget. So I don't want to confuse things anymore, but I did want to delineate those are two different positions and they fill two different needs. And so this addition of two within this particular academic staffing component really is adding those two instructional coaches in this area. So I just wanted everyone to be clear on the difference as opposed to maybe one academic staffing position and one community support position. I think in an effort to try to meet the need, we might want to consider that as well.
All right. Seeing no further speakers to this item, I go back to Trustee Bell for wrap-up.
Just to say, I really appreciate hearing from everyone around the table and how thoughtful they've been. And again, just a genuine expression of gratitude for Trustee Donna Dickson and Aisha Aziz for bringing this forward and supporting the voices of the community that we've heard today and our students. Thank you for supporting this amendment.
All right. The student trustees have asked for a recorded vote for this. And so I'm going to, no, for the amendment. Oh, no, sorry, not for the sub-amendment. For the amendment in general. All those in favor of the sub-amendment? All right. And opposed? And the sub-amendment carries. Back on to the main motion. Trustee Bell, you still have the floor.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Yep. Trustee Presley, you have the floor.
Oh, I retract my comments have been made. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. And that takes us to the end of my speakers list. Seeing no other speakers to this item, we go for wrap-up.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate everyone's patience on the discussion tonight. I appreciate especially staff's comment, Superintendent Hall for refreshing us on, and Superintendent Farrish on the nuances of a complex budget process. I think this is an important thing that we passed tonight as instructional coaches, because we've heard there was a need in the community to consider both instructional coaches and community support. And I think that's an important thing we continue to keep in mind as the budget process continues. Like I said before, as a Muslim graduate of this board, I'm grateful to support this kind of change that is much needed. I'm grateful for the community members who have come out and spoken in support and the importance of this kind of work. I'm going to turn to student trustee Malika. Did you want to add anything before we wrap up, as you had graciously introduced the motion? You can say no.
Anyway, I just wanted to say through you, Chair, I am very happy about this decision. And I think two would be like very useful, especially because we're talking about very separate identities that do overlap a lot. But we have such a diverse group of students that the last thing we would want would be for some people to be isolated with our attempt to group everyone. So I'm happy about this, and you already heard it. I will be supporting this. And Emma, the other student trustee.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We're going to a recorded vote. Manager Guthrie, if you could have the non-binding recorded vote and call the roll.
Trustee Lee,
In favor.
Trustee Dickson,
In favor.
Trustee Jennekens,
In favor.
Trustee Scott,
In favor?
Trustee Aziz,
In favor.
Trustee Blackburn,
In favor.
Trustee Nash,
In favor.
Trustee Milburn,
In favor.
Trustee Presley,
In favor.
Trustee Bell,
In favor.
Trustee Lyra,
In favor.
Student Trustee Hong,
In favor?
Student Trustee Kamanzi,
In favor.
And that passes 11 in favor, plus student trustees, 1 absent. And I'm now going to call the binding vote. All those in favor, raise your hands. And that passes. All right.